The sun hadn't yet fully risen over the base, but its light already glinted off the wet asphalt, shimmering over rows of jet-black Humvees and gleaming training grounds. The air carried the sharp tang of diesel, chlorine, and pine, a smell so familiar to seasoned Navy SEALs that it clung to them like a second skin. Into this environment, a new batch of recruits filed through the gates, their faces taut with determination, exhaustion, or fear. Among them was a young woman whose quiet presence went almost unnoticed. She moved with the kind of meticulous precision that made it clear she had drilled herself into shape long before arriving here. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, the insignias aligned with military precision, and her boots shone as though freshly polished by her own hands. Yet, unlike the others who introduced themselves with bravado or boastful chatter, she said almost nothing. She didn't boast about her high school athletic record or her time in ROTC. She didn't smile or wave or try to make friends. She simply kept her gaze fixed straight ahead, her movements controlled and deliberate. The other recruits whispered among themselves. "Who's the new girl?" one asked, glancing sideways at her. "Bet she's weak. Look at her, she barely cracks a smile." "She probably won't last a week," another replied, smirking. They laughed softly, assuming her quiet demeanor was a sign of timidity, a flaw that would quickly reveal itself once the training began. She didn't respond, not even a flicker of annoyance, just a calm, almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw. It wasn't arrogance, it was discipline, it was control. And though no one knew it yet, it was exactly what would make her dangerous in the world of SEALs, where noise often masked weakness. The barracks smelled of disinfectant and cheap wood polish. Beds were lined up in regimented rows, each with a thin mattress, a single pillow, and an iron frame bolted to the floor. She set down her duffel bag with quiet efficiency, unpacked only what was necessary, folding her clothing into perfect rectangles, and meticulously polishing her boots until the leather gleamed. Around her, the other recruits were louder, messier, laughing, joking, and sometimes fighting over trivial things, bunk space, toothpaste, who got the shower first. None of them noticed her. None of them tried. She was invisible to them on purpose, watching them just as they were watching her. Later, the sergeant in charge of initial drills marched the recruits onto the field for a briefing. The air was crisp, almost biting, and the ground was slick from a morning drizzle. "Listen up," he barked. "This isn't summer camp. If you can't handle it here, you won't survive out there. Each of you will be pushed until you break, and then we'll see what you're really made of." The group shifted uneasily. Some muttered under their breath. She stood at the edge of the formation, her posture impeccable, her expression unreadable. She didn't flinch when the sergeant's glare swept over her. She didn't mutter or complain when the first obstacle course was described, a grueling combination of walls, ropes, and mud pits that had crushed countless recruits before her. As the drill began, her calm exterior became a study in contrast. While others struggled over ropes or slid face-first into the muddy water, she moved with almost inhuman precision. Every foot planted with certainty, every handhold found instinctively. She navigated the obstacles without a sound, her breathing controlled, her movements fluid and efficient. The other recruits started noticing. Whispers spread across the field. "Did you see her?" one said, wiping mud from his brow. She's fast, too fast." "She's probably lucky," someone else muttered, but a seed of doubt had been planted. By the time the morning drills ended, she had completed the course faster than almost anyone else, her uniform muddy only at the very edges, her composure intact. The group stared, some in disbelief, others in quiet irritation, unwilling to accept that a quiet, unassuming recruit had just outperformed them. Later in the mess hall, the atmosphere was thick with chatter and the smell of reheated eggs and burnt coffee. Recruits crowded around tables, boasting about how far they had gone or complaining about the mud in their boots. She sat alone, methodically eating, never raising her voice, never looking for attention. When a group of recruits snickered and tried to shove her aside to claim a better seat, she didn't react with anger. She simply slid her tray to the side and waited, a calm intensity in her eyes that made them pause. From across the room, a figure watched silently Commander Holt. His dark sunglasses reflected the chaos around him as he observed the recruits. He had a reputation for seeing through lies, ego, and pretense, and though he didn't intervene, he made a note of her presence. There was something about her stillness, her quiet focus, that set her apart. Holt didn't speak. He didn't need to. He simply watched, and in that observation the first seeds of curiosity were planted. As evening descended, the recruits were dismissed to their bunks. The quiet recruit returned to her corner of the barracks. She didn't pull out a phone or scroll through social media like many others. She unpacked a small notebook, writing notes in neat, precise handwriting, a record of her observations, her mistakes, her thoughts. In her silence, there was strategy. In her solitude, there was preparation. She wasn't invisible because she wanted to be. She was invisible because she had chosen to wait, to watch, to learn. The whispers continued among the recruits. "Who is she really?" someone asked, uncertain. "She doesn't even talk." "She'll crack," another scoffed. "Everyone cracks eventually." But no one could see the quiet storm gathering inside her, the mental discipline, the years of preparation, the hunger for more than just survival. She had been trained, molded, and pushed before arriving here, and now she was ready to face what most hadn't even imagined. Outside the barracks, the last light of day glinted off the wet tarmac. Holt's shadow moved silently, observing, calculating. Somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of waves crashing against the base perimeter reminded everyone of the ocean that demanded more than mere courage. It demanded excellence. And Holt had already sensed that the quiet recruit was more than courage. She was precision, focus, and potential combined in a human form. The first day ended with the recruits exhausted, muddy, and unsure of themselves. But in her bunk, the quiet recruit closed her notebook, sat back, and allowed a single thought to pass through her mind. Tomorrow, they'll see why quiet isn't weakness. And as the lights dimmed and the barracks settled into silence, Holt's voice echoed silently in her memory, almost like a warning. "Ma'am." The word carried authority, weight, and the unspoken challenge of what was yet to come. The next morning, a gray mist clung to the base, giving the training grounds an otherworldly, almost ghostly look. The recruits lined up for what would be their first full obstacle course, a trial designed to test not just strength, but mental toughness, endurance, and nerve. A whistle blew sharply, and the chaos erupted. Most of the recruits moved like frantic animals caught in a trap. Hands slipped on slick ropes, boots sank into mud, and shouts echoed across the field. Panic was contagious. Some collapsed mid-course, gasping, unable to push further. Others cheered loudly, trying to mask fear with bravado. And then there was her, the quiet recruit. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She simply stepped forward with measured precision, eyes scanning each obstacle, memorizing angles, calculating every movement. The first wall loomed tall, slick with morning dew. While a few recruits struggled and fell repeatedly, she approached it like a seasoned climber. Her fingers gripped the wet wood, toes finding purchase with uncanny accuracy. In a motion so smooth it almost looked effortless, she vaulted over it, landing with silent assurance on the other side. A small ripple of surprise ran through the group, but many were too self-absorbed or arrogant to notice. The mud pit was next. It reeked of wet earth and sweat, sucking at boots like it wanted to drag the recruits under. Many slipped, splashed, and cursed. She moved with careful determination, keeping her center of gravity low, her body perfectly balanced, almost gliding across the mire. When a recruit flailed beside her, she briefly reached out, steadying him without breaking stride. By the time the rope climb arrived, she had already begun to draw subtle attention. Some recruits paused mid-mudslide to watch her, a combination of disbelief and irritation flashing across their faces. She didn't look at them, didn't acknowledge them. Her focus was absolute. Each pull, each grip, each push was executed with flawless precision. Her arms shook slightly, not from weakness but from the intense exertion that would have crushed lesser recruits, but she didn't falter. At the top of the rope, a commanding voice rang out from the sidelines, Commander Holt. He had arrived quietly, unnoticed until now, standing with arms crossed, his expression unreadable behind dark sunglasses. He watched her move with an intensity that could feel like a physical pressure, but she didn't flinch. Holt didn't need to bark orders. His presence alone was a test. The final stretch of the course was a series of walls interlaced with barbed wire. Many recruits stumbled, caught, or scraped themselves painfully against the metal. She, however, had studied the course the moment it was laid out. She moved like a shadow, ducking, rolling, and vaulting with preternatural ease. By the time she crossed the finish line, chest heaving, mud streaked across her uniform, she was ahead of nearly everyone else. The group was silent for a moment. No one clapped, no one cheered. They simply stared, some openly frustrated, others too shocked to speak. One recruit, red-faced and panting, muttered under his breath, How did she do that?" "She's just lucky," another said, refusing to acknowledge it. But Holt didn't speak. He simply stepped forward, signaling her to the front. His voice cut through the lingering fog with precise authority. "Ma'am, report to my office immediately." The word ma'am hung in the air, heavy and unfamiliar. It wasn't just a title, it was recognition, a declaration that she wasn't just another recruit. The group froze, some faces paled. A few dared a scoff, masking nervousness. But for the quiet recruit, it was an acknowledgement she had been waiting for, an invitation to step into a game that only a select few were ready to play. She didn't hesitate. She walked toward Holt's office, boots crunching softly against the gravel, her posture flawless, her head held high. Every step exuded confidence, yet not arrogance. There was power in restraint, strength in silence. The other recruits exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, they were uncertain about the quiet girl they had ignored. Inside the office, the atmosphere was heavy, lined with accolades, photographs of missions, and reminders of SEAL legends. Holt motioned for her to stand at attention. His gaze, sharp and unwavering, studied her as though trying to weigh every ounce of potential she carried. "You've got skill," he said after a moment, his voice low, deliberate. "But skill alone won't make you a SEAL. Do you know why most recruits fail?" "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice steady, controlled. No hesitation, no inflection of doubt. Holt leaned back, studying her quietly, the corners of his mouth barely twitching. "It's not the physical pain, it's not the exhaustion, it's the mind. The recruits who fail, who crumble, they let fear and ego control them. You, however," he paused, letting the words settle. "You may have something different, but don't assume I've made a judgment yet. This is only the first test." She nodded, absorbing every word. It wasn't praise, it was a challenge. A test far greater than any wall, mud pit, or rope climb. Holt's tests were known to break recruits, not just physically but mentally. And she knew she would have to endure, adapt, and dominate in ways most had never imagined. She left the office with a quiet nod, stepping back into the open air where the other recruits were still recovering from the course. Whispers followed her. "She finished before anyone else," one said. "Did you see that?" Another added, She's not like us." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her mind was already processing the next day, the next challenge, the next obstacle. She had come here to prove more than just competence. She had come to redefine expectations, and she would do it silently, relentlessly, without seeking attention. Later that evening, the recruits gathered in the mess hall again. Some tried to provoke her, others ignored her entirely. She ate alone, but this time she allowed herself a subtle glance around the room. Eyes followed her, some with fear, some with disbelief, some with grudging respect. She didn't react to any of it. She simply ate silently, like a predator surveying its environment before striking. Outside, the base was quiet now, the training ground slick under a lingering fog. Holt's shadow moved along the edge of the field. He had seen everything today. The skill, the composure, the absolute lack of panic, and he knew one thing. This recruit, the quiet one, was more dangerous than anyone else on the course. Not because of strength, not because of speed, but because of something far more elusive. control. As she lay in her bunk that night, notebook open, she made a simple note: observe, calculate, outlast. Silence is not weakness. And somewhere in the darkness of the base, a storm of anticipation was forming. Holt would test her further. The others would underestimate her again, but she didn't fear it. She welcomed it. She thrived on it. Tomorrow would bring more obstacles, more trials, more chaos. And she would face it all as she had today, with quiet precision, unshakable focus, and a resolve that no mockery, no doubt, no fear could ever diminish. The first test was over, but the war for respect, recognition, and survival had only just begun. The morning sun hadn't yet fully penetrated the blinds of Commander Holt's office when the quiet recruit stepped through the heavy door. The room smelled of leather, polished wood, and the faint tang of sweat from decades of rigorous training. Every wall was lined with framed commendations, photographs of elite missions, and plaques honoring SEALs who had gone above and beyond the call of duty. The air felt heavy with expectation, and the silence pressed down on her like a tangible weight. Holt was already there, standing behind a large oak desk, hands clasped. His eyes, sharp and assessing behind his dark glasses, tracked her every movement. He didn't smile, didn't greet her with false kindness. He simply waited, letting the tension in the room mount. She came to attention, heels snapping together, spine straight, head high. Her hands rested lightly at her sides, and though her chest rose with the rhythm of exertion from the obstacle course, her composure remained intact. "You've shown skill," Holt said after a long pause, his voice low, deliberate. "But skill alone does not make a SEAL. You've completed the first test, yes. You've outperformed most of your peers, but this," he gestured around the office, "this is where most recruits fail, not because they're weak, not because they're unfit, because they don't know themselves. They don't understand fear, they don't control it, and most importantly, they let pride or doubt or emotion dictate their actions." Her eyes met his evenly. "Yes, sir," she said, the words steady, carrying a calm that surprised even herself. Holt walked slowly around his desk, each step deliberate, echoing softly against the polished wood floor. "You're quiet," he said, almost conversationally but with the weight of command. "Most quiet recruits fade into the background. They disappear. They become invisible because it's easier to survive that way. But there's a presence in your silence, a kind of danger. People don't see it yet, but I do." The silence stretched between them. It wasn't uncomfortable, it was charged, like electricity waiting to arc. Holt stopped, standing mere feet away, and studied her as if weighing her soul. She felt no fear, only a steady awareness of every detail in the room. The way the sun angled across his desk, the faint scuff marks on the floor, the smell of polish mixed with the metallic tang of sweat from previous drills. "You may not realize it," Holt continued, his voice quiet but firm, "but every decision you make, every reaction you have is being observed. Here we test everything, not just physical ability, but judgment, composure, and resilience under pressure. Most people crumble because they don't prepare for the unseen. They react, panic, or give in to emotion. You have shown control. That control can make you exceptional or deadly if misused." She nodded, a flicker of anticipation running through her chest. This wasn't praise. This was a challenge. Holt's reputation preceded him, known for breaking recruits, pushing them past what they thought were their limits, exposing their weaknesses, then forcing them to rebuild stronger. Most would have shivered in fear under his gaze, but she didn't. She welcomed the challenge. Holt walked back behind his desk and folded his hands over the dark wood surface. "Tomorrow," he said, his eyes locking onto hers, "you will face a mental test, a drill that most recruits fail before the first hour has ended. I don't expect you to succeed, but I want to see how you handle fear when it isn't just about physical endurance, how you respond when control is stripped from you." She tilted her head slightly, her mind already racing through scenarios, calculations, possibilities. "Yes, sir," she said again. Her voice was calm, unwavering. Holt didn't smile, he rarely did, but there was a subtle shift in his posture, a recognition of potential, the faintest hint that this recruit had something rare. Potential isn't enough, he said, almost to himself. Discipline without adaptability is useless. Strength without patience is dangerous. You'll learn that soon enough, and if you survive, you may become one of the best. She left the office without a word, each step deliberate, measured. Outside, the recruits were milling about, laughing, complaining about sore muscles, mud in their boots, or the sting of early drills. Many of them didn't notice her as she walked past. A few glanced, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Holt's word "ma'am" had spread like wildfire. Some of the recruits whispered about it, uncertain, even intimidated. "Ma'am," one asked, incredulous, "did he really say that?" "Yeah," another replied, a mixture of disbelief and skepticism. "What does that even mean? He doesn't call anyone that." Their ignorance amused her slightly, though she didn't let it show. Recognition, she knew, was earned, not demanded, and Holt's acknowledgement meant more than any chatter or approval from peers. She had passed a threshold, entered a different league. As the day progressed, the recruits were ordered into classroom sessions, where mental drills, navigation exercises, and strategy lessons were explained. Most struggled to focus, distracted by the physical exhaustion of the previous day. She, however, absorbed everything with laser-like focus. Notes were taken with meticulous care. Every instruction, every nuance, every subtle warning from instructors was recorded mentally, cataloged for later. By afternoon, a new set of physical exercises began. Holt appeared again, moving silently among the recruits, observing their form, their determination, their mistakes. When he paused by her, she didn't flinch. He simply watched, as if trying to gauge how much discipline and endurance her quiet exterior could contain. Then came the final test of the day, a timed swimming drill in the freezing pool. Panic was almost immediate for many recruits as they jumped in, water shocking their systems, lungs burning, arms flailing. She dove in without hesitation, her strokes smooth and efficient, muscles working in perfect rhythm. Other recruits gasped at her speed and control. When she emerged at the other side, she was ahead of most by a significant margin. The water dripping from her uniform only enhanced the aura of calm intensity she exuded. Holt, standing on the poolside, adjusted his sunglasses and gave a subtle nod, small, almost imperceptible, but it carried enormous weight. The day ended with the recruits exhausted, shivering, and questioning their own limits. She returned to the barracks, towel wrapped around her shoulders, notebook open, already cataloging the day's lessons, mistakes, and observations. The quiet determination in her eyes was unmistakable. She wasn't just enduring, she was absorbing, preparing, and growing stronger with every challenge. Later, as the sun set, painting the sky in streaks of crimson and gold, Holt's shadow fell across the yard. He watched her briefly from a distance, assessing. Most recruits had no idea who he was paying attention to, but he had already marked her as different. Silent, focused, disciplined, capable beyond what most could imagine. The whispers of doubt among her peers had begun to shift. Curiosity replaced mockery. Respect, tentative and cautious, began to take root. But the quiet recruit didn't notice. She wasn't seeking validation. She was preparing for the challenges that Holt had promised, a storm of trials, both mental and physical, that would decide not just who survived but who excelled. Tomorrow would be the real test, the kind that separated recruits from legends. And she was ready. The morning air was sharp and bitter, carrying the scent of salt and diesel from the nearby coastline. A dense fog hovered over the base, obscuring the training grounds and lending the area an otherworldly, almost hostile edge. The recruits lined up at the edge of the tidal training pool, a massive expanse of water churning in unnatural waves, designed to test endurance, courage, and control under extreme stress. Most of the recruits were visibly anxious. Their muscles twitched from fatigue, minds racing with the lessons of previous drills. Panic was an ever-present specter in the base. It whispered in the ears of those who doubted themselves. The water, icy and relentless, was meant to expose that doubt. She, however, stepped forward with quiet purpose. Every motion was deliberate, every breath measured. She didn't hesitate, didn't flinch at the icy bite of the wind, didn't allow her mind to wander. Her body was prepared, her mind sharpened. "Dive," barked the sergeant overseeing the drill. Chaos erupted. Most recruits plunged into the water, flailing, splashing, gasping. Arms and legs churned in desperation, lungs burning, muscles screaming for release. Some tried to stay afloat, only to be dragged under by the merciless currents the instructors had created. And then there was her. She slipped into the water like a shadow, movements controlled and efficient. Her arms cut through the waves, legs propelling her with precision. Each stroke was calculated, each breath timed. She didn't gasp, didn't panic, didn't let the cold steal her focus. She moved faster than most, cutting through the churning water as if it were an extension of her own body. Midway through the drill, a fellow recruit, a tall, burly man struggling to stay afloat, let out a desperate shout. The water had claimed him, and the tide pulled him under in terrifying swirls. Without breaking her rhythm, she dove beneath the surface, silent and precise. Her arms wrapped around him, muscles straining against both his weight and the pull of the current. She maneuvered them both to safety with a calm efficiency that left onlookers dumbstruck. "You saved me," he gasped, clutching her arm, chest heaving. "I didn't save you," she said, her voice calm, unwavering. "I did what needed to be done." Around them, whispers began to ripple through the group. "Did you see that?" One recruit said, eyes wide. She's different." "She's faster, stronger," another muttered. "No one moves like that." From the sidelines, Commander Holt observed silently, hands crossed behind his back. He didn't clap, didn't gesture, didn't even acknowledge the murmurs. He simply watched. Every motion, every reaction, every calculated stroke. There was a difference between strength and command. She had both. The drill wasn't over. Holt's voice rang out across the pool, cutting through the chaos. "Ma'am, demonstrate the underwater extraction." The other recruits froze. Holt rarely singled anyone out in such a way, especially with the title ma'am. The word was more than etiquette. It was recognition, authority, and respect wrapped into a single syllable. She didn't hesitate. Without hesitation, she submerged herself again, moving with uncanny precision to simulate the extraction of an unconscious soldier. Every movement was exact, efficient. She surfaced, breathing controlled, eyes scanning, muscles taut and ready. The exercise was flawless. Some of the recruits stared, open-mouthed. Others scowled, reluctant to admit what they were witnessing. A few turned away, frustration burning in their eyes. Holt didn't speak immediately. He simply walked forward, boots crunching softly against the gravel, adjusting his sunglasses. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but carried over the water. "Impressive," he said, simple, deliberate. No praise, no indulgence, just acknowledgement. "Most recruits panic, most recruits fail, but you, ma'am, you have control. You make the water obey, not the other way around." Her chest rose slightly, the exertion from the drill heavy on her lungs. But she didn't smile. She didn't need to. Holt's rare acknowledgement was validation enough. The other recruits, wet, exhausted, and shivering, exchanged uneasy glances. Rumors had begun to form. She's not just surviving, she's excelling. Fear began to mix with respect, though none dared to approach her directly. Some muttered under their breath, questioning themselves. How could she be so calm, so precise, so untouchable? By the time the drill ended, the fog had lifted slightly, revealing the sun glinting off the wet pool surface. The recruits staggered out of the water, some leaning on each other for support, others silently nursing bruises and sore muscles. She walked out with measured steps, posture perfect, muscles taut, boots carrying her as though the water had been nothing more than a mild inconvenience. In the barracks later, most of the recruits were too exhausted to speak, but whispers persisted. "Who is she really?" one asked, eyes wide with awe. She's untouchable," another whispered. "I don't get it. How is she doing this?" She didn't respond. She didn't need to. She settled into her corner of the barracks, carefully removing waterlogged clothing, taking time to dry her boots and uniform. Then she opened her notebook, jotting down observations, calculations, and corrections. Every moment in the water had been analyzed in her mind, every movement catalogued for future improvement. She wasn't just surviving, she was studying, learning, preparing for the next challenge. Meanwhile, Holt's figure was visible from the observation window, a silent shadow against the fading sunlight. He had seen the drill unfold from every angle. He had watched the fear, the panic, and the exhaustion of the recruits. And most importantly, he had watched her calm, precise, and controlled response to chaos. Holt had trained men and women who could survive extreme physical and mental challenges. Few had ever approached the level of control he had witnessed in her. And though he remained silent, a subtle recognition passed through him. She was not like the others. She was capable of more than anyone realized, and she would soon face tests that would break most recruits in half. As the evening settled over the base, the recruits returned to their bunks. Some tried to provoke her, asking questions, trying to break her silence. Others left her alone, intimidated by the quiet authority she exuded. She allowed them their assumptions. She was invisible to most, untouchable to some, and fully aware of every detail, every interaction. Lying in her bunk that night, she stared at the ceiling, notebook open beside her. Her mind replayed every stroke, every motion, every decision she had made in the water. She wrote a single note in her meticulous handwriting: control, observation, precision. Silence is strength. Outside, the fog rolled back in, clinging to the base like a shroud. Holt's voice, though distant, seemed to echo in her mind. "Ma'am." The word carried weight, authority, and expectation. It wasn't praise, it wasn't recognition, it was a challenge. Tomorrow would bring a new trial. The stakes would rise. And she was ready. Night had fallen over the base, blanketing the training grounds in a heavy darkness punctuated only by faint floodlights and the distant glow of the coastline. The air was thick with fog, carrying the scent of damp earth and the faint metallic tang of salt from the nearby ocean. Exhaustion clung to the recruits like a second skin, each breath sharp and ragged, every muscle aching from days of grueling drills. Commander Holt's voice echoed through the night, authoritative and unforgiving. "Night endurance, run through the forest. No excuses, no breaks. Fail and you fail. Move." The recruits shivered, not just from cold but from the knowledge that Holt's night exercises were legendary. Few had ever finished them. Most had quit halfway, some had gotten lost in the dense woods, and others had collapsed from sheer exhaustion. The forest, dark and imposing, became a crucible where fear and resolve clashed in every heartbeat. She stepped forward without hesitation. Boots crunching softly against the gravel, her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths, she scanned the darkness ahead. The others jittered and whispered nervously, many glancing at her with thinly veiled apprehension. "She's calm," one muttered. "How is she not freaking out?" "Don't know," another whispered. "I think she's not human." The run began. The recruits surged into the forest, branches whipping at faces, roots threatening to trip tired legs. Mud clung to their boots, the uneven terrain forcing them to concentrate on every step. Panic crept in for some almost immediately. Breathing became erratic, eyes darting in every direction, muscles trembling. And then she moved. Step after step, stride after stride, she carved through the darkness with uncanny precision. Every branch avoided, every root anticipated. Her focus was absolute. No noise escaped her lips. No hesitation slowed her pace. Where others faltered, she adapted. Where others panicked, she calculated. A stumble in the group drew her attention. A recruit had fallen into a shallow creek, water soaking through his uniform, hands shaking as he tried to climb out. Without slowing her pace, she extended a hand, gripping his forearm and pulling him back onto solid ground with smooth, effortless efficiency. He looked at her with wide eyes, gratitude mingled with disbelief. Thank you," he stammered. "I didn't save you," she said simply, voice steady. I kept you from becoming a liability. Keep moving." The forest was unforgiving. Thorned bushes tore at exposed skin, and uneven terrain threatened sprained ankles with every step. Exhaustion weighed heavily, but she pressed on, every muscle working in harmony, every breath controlled. The fog thickened, shadows stretching and shifting in ways that made the woods feel alive, sentient, watching, judging. Behind her she could hear the others struggling. Whispers of fear, the occasional cry of frustration or pain filled the air. But she didn't look back. She didn't need to. She was aware of everything: the forest, the recruits, the invisible eyes of Holt observing from the shadows. Hours seemed to stretch into eternity as the run pushed the recruits past every limit they had imagined. Some dropped to their knees, collapsing under the weight of their own bodies. Others muttered curses, tears mixing with sweat and mud on their faces. And yet she moved on, a silent force cutting through exhaustion, fear, and chaos. Suddenly Holt's voice rang out from a distance, calm but firm. "Line up, now." The fog shifted, and the faint glow of his flashlight illuminated a clearing. One by one, the recruits stumbled into the circle of light, breathless, muddy, and shaking. Some tried to stand tall, but exhaustion betrayed them. Some looked around at their peers, silent fear mirrored in every eye. She stepped forward last, composed, boots caked in mud, uniform soaked and torn from branches and brambles. Her chest rose and fell with controlled breaths, her gaze steady and unyielding. There was no sign of hesitation, no sign of doubt. Holt studied each recruit, scanning for weakness, for fear, for cracks in resolve. He paused on her. His eyes, hidden behind dark glasses, bore into hers. "Most of you," he said, voice low but carrying across the clearing, "will not survive the next phase of training. Fear, panic, and ego will break you. Only those who can control themselves, even when every instinct screams to quit, will endure." His gaze lingered on her longer than anyone else. "Ma'am," he said quietly, deliberately, "lead the formation through the final obstacle." The other recruits froze. They had not expected this. She didn't react, not with arrogance, not with hesitation. She simply stepped forward, shoulders squared, eyes scanning the darkness ahead. "Follow my pace," she instructed, voice calm, commanding. "Watch my steps, don't fall behind, stay close." The forest, already oppressive, became almost silent. Even the wind seemed to pause, as though waiting to see if she would falter. Step by step, she guided them, correcting form when needed, helping those who stumbled, pulling the weaker along without breaking stride. Her authority was absolute, not derived from loud words or threats, but from competence, confidence, and the unspoken command that came from unwavering skill. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, the first hints of dawn were painting the horizon in muted shades of orange and red. Exhaustion was etched into every recruit's face, but none could deny the transformation that had occurred. Fear had been confronted. Panic had been overcome. And at the center of it all stood the quiet recruit, a figure of unshakable resolve. Holt stepped forward from the shadows, his boots crunching softly against the gravel. The group instinctively straightened, but she remained calm, posture perfect, eyes scanning the horizon as though nothing could break her focus. "I didn't expect anyone to make it through tonight," Holt said, voice calm but loaded with authority. "Most would have quit hours ago, consumed by panic or fatigue. But you, ma'am, you've just rewritten the standard." A ripple of shock and awe passed through the other recruits. Whispers spread, "She's not just another recruit, she's different." Some felt fear now, the kind that arises when you realize the rules have changed, and someone previously overlooked has become something formidable, untouchable. Others looked on in silent respect, recognizing for the first time that they had underestimated her completely. She didn't respond, she didn't need to. Holt's acknowledgement, quiet as it was more than any approval or praise from peers could provide. It was recognition, authority, validation. Later in the barracks, exhausted and cold, she settled into her usual corner. Boots and uniform removed, she opened her notebook and began writing. Control, observation, leadership. Every fear faced is an opportunity. Silence is not weakness. Outside, Holt's figure disappeared into the pre-dawn light, a shadow against the slowly brightening horizon. He had seen everything tonight, the fear, the struggle, the triumph, and he had marked her as something rare, a recruit who could endure beyond expectation, who could lead silently yet command respect, who would challenge the very limits of what it meant to survive SEAL training. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in streaks of gold and crimson, the quiet recruit sat in her bunk, muscles aching, lungs burning, mind racing. She had survived the breaking point. She had endured the night, and she knew deep down that the true challenges were still ahead. But she was ready. The forest had tested her. The night had pushed her to the edge, and when she emerged, it wasn't just survival, it was dominance in silence. The base was eerily silent the next morning, the fog lifting slowly to reveal a harsh, sun-bleached training ground. Commander Holt had announced the next phase, a simulated hostage rescue. It was one of the most grueling mental and physical challenges in SEAL training, designed to test strategy, composure, teamwork, and instinct under extreme pressure. Recruits gathered in a clearing, their expressions a mix of dread and anticipation. Whispers filled the air. "I heard no one finishes this drill cleanly," one recruit muttered, eyes darting nervously. "You get inside the building, there's chaos, smoke, alarms, and the hostages. They're moving, yelling, you'll panic, I guarantee it." She stood silently at the edge of the group, posture perfect, eyes scanning the training site. Smoke machines hissed in the distance, simulating chaos. Dummies and instructors hidden in shadows would act unpredictably, and alarms would sound at random intervals. It wasn't just about speed. It was about mental control, improvisation, and leadership. Holt stepped forward, adjusting his dark sunglasses, and addressed the recruits. "This is not a race. This is a test of judgment. Panic will get you killed. Hesitation will get you killed. Composure, strategy, and adaptability will determine who survives and who excels. Ma'am, you will lead this exercise." The group froze, her leading. Holt had already singled her out publicly, giving her authority over the very peers who had ignored and mocked her for days. The whispers shifted to uneasy murmurs. Some scowled, some bristled with defiance, and a few exchanged doubtful glances. She didn't falter. Stepping forward, she addressed the group calmly with measured authority. "Follow my lead. Stay focused. Observe, anticipate. Don't rush blindly. Control your breathing, control your movement, control the environment around you. Let's move." The recruits, reluctantly impressed and unnerved, fell in line behind her. Her calm presence was magnetic. Fear was present, yes, but it was tempered by competence. She had faced exhaustion, water, mud, and darkness. Now she would face chaos and decision-making under extreme duress. The drill began. Smoke billowed from the mock building, alarms blared, lights flickered, and instructors moved unpredictably, shouting, gesturing, and throwing distractions into the mix. Recruits hesitated at the entrance, eyes wide with panic. She led them forward with steady, purposeful steps. "Focus on your breathing, step quietly, watch for threats," she instructed, scanning for danger. When a recruit froze in hesitation, she touched his shoulder and guided him forward. "Move with me, trust your training." Inside the building, chaos erupted. Smoke stung eyes, alarms blared in irregular intervals, and dummies simulating hostages were moved unpredictably by instructors. Some recruits panicked immediately, barking orders, tripping over one another, or making hasty, unsafe decisions. She remained calm, calculating every movement. Her eyes were sharp, taking in every detail: the position of obstacles, the spacing of the hostages, the location of instructors, and the safest path forward. Suddenly, a recruit misjudged a corner and nearly collided with a dummy. "Stop!" she barked, voice slicing through the chaos. She grabbed his arm, correcting his posture, and whispered, "Focus. Assess first, act second. Move carefully." The other recruits began to follow her cues. Her calm authority imposed order amidst the madness. Each room, corridor, and stairwell became a controlled space rather than a chaotic obstacle. They reached the final room, where the last simulated hostage was trapped behind a barricade. Smoke swirled, alarms blared, and instructors moved aggressively to simulate threats. Most recruits would have panicked here, but she moved with precision. "Coordinate with me," she instructed, gesturing silently to the others. "One handles the barricade, one covers the door, keep eyes on the environment." Her leadership was exacting but unyielding. The recruits followed her, executing tasks with precision they hadn't believed themselves capable of. When the barricade was lifted and the hostage safely guided out, she didn't celebrate or draw attention to herself. She simply ensured the group exited efficiently, breathing steady, eyes still scanning for threats. Outside, Holt observed the outcome from a distance, expression unreadable. Few had completed this drill without critical errors. Most had failed under stress, but her team had navigated the chaos with minimal mistakes. Holt's dark sunglasses reflected the scene as he slowly nodded. "Impressive," he said, voice calm but deliberate. "Few can lead without yelling, without panicking. Ma'am, you've turned chaos into order, and you've done it with authority, composure, and precision." Her chest rose slightly, but she didn't smile. Holt's acknowledgement was enough. She knew it was not praise, it was observation. Validation, yes, but also a signal that the stakes were only rising. The other recruits were silent, some embarrassed by their mistakes, others awed by her leadership. The quiet girl they had ignored for days now commanded their attention and respect, not through volume or aggression, but through skill, composure, and competence. Later in the barracks, exhaustion weighed heavily on everyone. Some sat silently, replaying mistakes. Some whispered in hushed tones about her performance, some with disbelief, others with grudging respect. She, as always, remained in her corner, removing her uniform, drying her boots, and opening her notebook. Every detail of the drill was meticulously recorded, mistakes to avoid, strategies that worked, and observations about human behavior under stress. Her mind was not just processing survival, it was analyzing, calculating, and planning for the future. The quiet authority she had displayed in the drill had begun to shift the balance among the recruits. Some avoided eye contact, fearful of her competence. Others lingered near her, hopping to learn without admitting it openly. The dynamic was changing, subtly but unmistakably. Outside, the fatting sun cast long shadows over the base. Holt walked past the training grounds silently, evaluating. He had seen fear, indecision, and chaos today, and he had also seen mastery. Not just physical mastery, but control of mind, environment, and people. In her bunk, the quiet recruit wrote a single line in her notebook: "Leadership is silent. Fear obeys only control. Chaos is opportunity." Tomorrow would bring more trials. Physical endurance would merge with strategy, mental fortitude would be tested alongside instinct. She had survived fatigue, water, night drills, and simulated chaos. And yet, she knew, the real challenges had only begun. As the night settled over the base, silence filled the barracks. Holt's words echoed faintly in her memory. "Ma'am." The weight of the title was no longer just acknowledgement, it was a mark of expectation. And she was ready. The quiet recruit had led where others faltered, commanded respect without arrogance, and transformed fear into control. But the war for mastery and recognition was far from over. The next morning, the air was thick with heat and the metallic scent of spent ammunition. Today's exercise was the most dangerous yet, a live-fire tactical drill. The recruits would face simulated enemies, moving targets, and complex mission objectives designed to push every ounce of skill, focus, and nerve. One wrong move could mean failure or injury. As the recruits lined up, Holt appeared from the shadows, his boots crunching against the gravel with the quiet authority of a predator. His dark sunglasses reflected the sun glinting off the targets ahead. He surveyed the group, eyes pausing on each recruit, calculating, judging, weighing potential against weakness. "Today," he began, voice calm but cutting through the morning air, "you will execute a live-fire room-clearing exercise. Precision, coordination, and timing are everything. Panic or hesitation will get you eliminated." "Ma'am," he said, his gaze locking onto the quiet recruit, "you will lead." A ripple of tension ran through the group. She had already earned quiet respect, but now Holt publicly placed her in command during the most dangerous exercise they would face yet. Some recruits bristled, resentment flashing in their eyes. Others looked uncertain, nervous about following her. She stepped forward without hesitation, boots firmly planted, chin high, eyes scanning the training area. Calmly, she addressed the team. "Focus. Move deliberately. Watch your angles. Communicate silently. Trust your instincts and mine. We succeed together or we fail together." The other recruits exchanged uneasy glances. Some hesitated, but the quiet authority in her voice, the precision in her posture, and the confidence in her demeanor demanded attention. Slowly, grudgingly, they nodded, falling into formation behind her. The drill began. Alarms blared. Smoke grenades hissed. Moving targets darted across windows, doors slammed, and instructors simulated aggressors, shouting and acting unpredictably. Bullets, non-lethal of course, cracked the air, adding weight to every step, every decision. Most recruits froze almost immediately, scanning wildly, hesitating before entering rooms. Some fired prematurely, missing their targets. Others flinched at every sound, forgetting the tactics drilled into them. She moved forward with calm precision, every footstep calculated, every angle observed. Her eyes were sharp, scanning each doorway and corner, predicting threats before they appeared. "Right flank, cover the door," she instructed, pointing silently with her weapon. "Left, sweep the windows. Center, stay low and ready to breach. On my signal, move." The team obeyed, some reluctantly. Her composure was infectious. Panic began to dissipate as she calmly guided them through the first rooms. She coordinated their movements like a conductor directing a symphony of controlled chaos. Suddenly, an instructor simulated a hostage scream from a doorway. Most recruits froze. One stepped forward recklessly, aiming at the wrong target. She reacted instantly, hand on his shoulder, stopping him. "Wait, assess. Don't act blindly, move with awareness." He stammered, nerves rattling, but he obeyed. Under her guidance, they cleared the room successfully. Outside, Holt watched with narrowed eyes, evaluating. The other recruits were visibly shaken by her competence. Some glared, jealousy flaring. Others were visibly inspired, realizing for the first time that her calm, unshakable authority had a tangible impact on survival. By midday, the drill intensified. The smoke grew thicker, alarms more erratic. Targets moved unpredictably. The forest-like training grounds simulated urban combat with mazes of buildings, narrow corridors, and hidden threats at every turn. She led the team with unwavering focus. When a recruit stumbled over debris, she caught him mid-fall without breaking stride. When another misjudged an angle and almost crossed into a live-fire zone, she barked a sharp warning, pulling him to safety. Her leadership wasn't loud or aggressive. It was precise, quiet, and commanding. She didn't need to shout. Every instruction, every subtle gesture, every glance conveyed authority and control. The climax of the exercise came as they approached the final building, the hostage extraction zone. Smoke choked the hallways. Sound was distorted by alarms and simulated explosions. Recruits were exhausted, muscles trembling, focus fraying at the edges. Most would panic here, most would fail. She, however, did not. "Breathe, move as one," she instructed quietly. "We enter together, we act together, we exit together. Eyes open, focus, trust me." They breached the final doorway. Chaos erupted. Smoke and sound disoriented the team. One recruit froze mid-step, weapon shaking. She moved to his side, steadying his arms, whispering, "Control your breathing. Observe. Don't fire until you see the target clearly." The final hostages were located and rescued efficiently under her calm coordination. Every recruit made it through alive. Few could believe it. Some stared at her in disbelief. Others nodded in quiet respect, finally understanding that she was not just competent, she was exceptional. Holt's voice cut through the haze. "Most fail, most crumble, you didn't. Ma'am, you've not only survived every test but have elevated those around you. Leadership isn't given, it's earned. And today, you've proven it." She lowered her weapon, breathing steady, eyes scanning her team. She didn't smile. She didn't bask in recognition. Holt's acknowledgement was enough. She had survived the firestorm, guided others through chaos, and done so without faltering. The aftermath of the drill left the recruits shaken and exhausted. Some avoided eye contact, too intimidated to challenge her. Others lingered, trying to learn without admitting it. The balance of respect had shifted definitively. Back in the barracks, she cleaned her gear silently, methodically. Each bullet, each weapon, each piece of equipment was checked, cleaned, and logged in her notebook. She reflected on the drill, analyzing every decision, every movement, every mistake, her own and others. Her team, now fully aware of her competence, treated her differently. The quiet authority she carried was no longer optional. It was the only way to survive the increasingly brutal training ahead. Outside, Holt walked past the training ground silently, observing from a distance. He had seen recruits crumble in fear, flounder in panic, and falter under pressure. And he had seen her, calm, precise, commanding, unyielding. Few had earned such recognition. Fewer still had survived live-fire exercises with such skill and composure. That evening, as the sun set, the quiet recruit wrote a single line in her notebook: "Control commands. Fear obeys precision. Leadership is action, not words." The day had tested her in every conceivable way, physically, mentally, emotionally. She had faced chaos, guided others through it, and emerged unbroken. And yet, deep down, she knew the ultimate challenges were still ahead. Holt's final evaluations, the most grueling mental and physical trials, loomed on the horizon. She closed her notebook, boots and uniform cleaned, and lay in her bunk, muscles aching, lungs still burning from the exertion. But her mind was clear, focused, ready. Firestorm had tested her limits, and she had surpassed them, but the final trials were coming. And when they arrived, she would not just survive, she would dominate. The sun barely pierced the horizon, casting long shadows over the training grounds. Today wasn't just another drill, it was the final evaluation. Holt's most grueling, most demanding test of endurance, skill, and leadership. For most recruits, this day would break them. For some, it would define their very existence within the SEAL program. Recruits gathered silently, tension palpable in the cold morning air. Muscles burned, lungs still tight from previous days of grueling drills, minds fatigued yet alert. Everyone knew the stakes. Even whispers were hushed, as if fear had leached the courage from their voices. She stood at the edge of the group, boots planted firmly, posture perfect, eyes scanning the landscape. Her uniform was worn, streaked with mud and sweat, yet she radiated a quiet confidence. No one approached her. No one dared. Her authority had been cemented in the fires of every previous challenge: night runs, water drills, tactical exercises, live fire simulations. And now the ultimate test awaited. Holt emerged from the shadows, moving silently with the precision of a predator. His dark sunglasses reflected the early light, and his expression, as always, was unreadable. He stopped in front of the recruits, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of anticipation settle over them. "This is it," he began, voice calm but charged with authority. "Every skill you've learned, every test you've survived, culminates in this moment. You will face simulated missions, unpredictable threats, extreme physical and mental demands, and the chaos of combat scenarios all at once. Most will fail, many will collapse, some may even quit, but survival is not enough. Leadership, judgment, composure under pressure, and mastery of fear will determine who succeeds. His gaze swept over the recruits, lingering on each one. Finally, it settled on her. "Ma'am," he said quietly, the single word cutting through the tension. "Lead. Show me and everyone else what true mastery looks like." The group stiffened. Again, the quiet recruit once ignored was thrust into authority under the most extreme circumstances. Her peers hesitated, some with resentment, some with awe, others with fear. She didn't flinch. She didn't falter. "Follow my lead," she instructed, voice steady, commanding, and calm. "Eyes open, mind alert, trust your training and me. We move as one, no mistakes, no hesitation." The recruits, though reluctant, obeyed. Step by step, they advanced across the rugged terrain, into a maze of buildings, tunnels, and simulated urban combat zones. Smoke and dust hung heavy in the air, alarms blared intermittently, and instructors acting as aggressors moved unpredictably, shouting and simulating threats at every turn. Most recruits faltered immediately. Fear crept into their motions, hesitation slowed their steps, mistakes mounted. Bullets, simulated but fast and precise, cracked near them, adding weight to every decision. She, however, moved with unwavering precision. Every step, every glance, every motion calculated. She coordinated her team seamlessly, issuing silent signals and subtle gestures that directed movement, controlled angles, and maximized efficiency. A recruit panicked, misjudging a doorway and nearly stepping into a simulated hazard. She intercepted him mid-stride, steadying his posture. "Control your breathing. Observe first, act second. Move with awareness," she whispered, voice calm but firm. Another stumbled over debris, nearly losing a weapon. She caught him with ease, maintaining her momentum and keeping the team moving forward. Her leadership wasn't loud or aggressive. It was composed, precise, and absolute. Hours stretched into a grueling test of endurance, skill, and intellect. The team navigated chaotic scenarios, unpredictable obstacles, and simulated casualties. Each challenge demanded split-second decisions and flawless execution. Most recruits would have cracked under the pressure. Most did. But under her guidance, her team adapted, executed, and survived. Finally, they reached the last challenge, a simulated hostage extraction under heavy fire. Smoke choked the corridors, alarms blared, and every recruit's endurance was pushed to the brink. Most would have faltered, most had. She paused at the threshold, assessing the room with calm, sharp eyes. "Positions," she instructed. "Cover the entry, sweep the room, extract the hostages. Move as one, timing is everything." They moved, every motion coordinated, every action deliberate. She cleared the first room with flawless precision, directing others, correcting missteps, anticipating hazards. The final room held the hostages, simulations designed to test nerves, judgment, and control under extreme stress. The team entered as one. Smoke billowed, instructors shouted, distractions erupted, and simulated fire crackled dangerously close. She moved like a shadow, calm and focused, guiding each recruit, keeping them on task, keeping them alive. When the last hostage was safely extracted, she signaled the team to exit. Step by step, they moved through the chaos, emerging into the open sunlight, breathing ragged but triumphant. No one had faltered under her direct guidance. No one had been harmed. Holt stood in the clearing, observing silently. For a long moment, no words were spoken. Then, finally, he removed his sunglasses, his dark eyes fixed on her. "You have exceeded every expectation," he said, voice low but resonant. "Few recruits demonstrate the mastery, composure, and leadership you've shown. Most would have crumbled long ago. But you, ma'am, you've not only survived. You've elevated those around you, commanded respect, and turned chaos into order." For the first time, she allowed a small nod. No smile, no celebration, just acknowledgement of the enormity of what she had achieved. Holt's rare recognition was far more valuable than any applause or praise from peers. The other recruits stood silently, a mixture of awe, respect, and fear in their expressions. Whispers spread quickly. She's not just exceptional, she's untouchable. Some had already begun to reevaluate every assumption they had made about her and themselves. Later, back in the barracks, she carefully cleaned her equipment, methodically logging every observation in her notebook. Each detail from the final evaluation, every tactical decision, every behavior observed, hers and her peers, was recorded meticulously. She didn't write for recognition. She wrote to prepare for the future, to refine every skill, to ensure she would never be caught unprepared. Holt's voice echoed in her mind, "Ma'am." It wasn't just a title, it was acknowledgement, authority, expectation, recognition of skill that few would ever earn. That night she lay in her bunk, exhausted yet clear-headed. Every muscle ached, every nerve was taut, but her mind was calm, focused, and unwavering. She had faced water drills, night endurance runs, live fire exercises, simulated chaos, and the ultimate evaluation. She had survived, led, and dominated. Tomorrow, the world outside the training grounds might be waiting, full of challenges and chaos far greater than anything within the base. But tonight, she had proven something undeniable. That quiet strength, unyielding focus, and precise leadership could command respect, earn recognition, and conquer fear. The storm of training was over for now. Holt had marked her as a force, a leader, a presence that could not be ignored. And as sleep finally claimed her, the quiet recruit knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was no longer just a recruit. She was a SEAL in every sense that mattered. The quiet had become power, the ignored had become authority, and the impossible had become hers.